Inspirational Creatives, episode 169.
This is how it works, is the way you think will profoundly affect the way you feel.
Welcome to Inspirational Creatives. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence. Join me every Friday as I chat with successful artists, producers, and creative entrepreneurs who share powerful stories and strategies. They can help you to create the life that you want. Listen each week as these inspirational creatives show you how to take your creativity to the next level. You'll learn how to create a sustainable business that inspires others and gives you the financial freedom and lifestyle that you want. Thanks for listening. Make sure you sign up at inspirationalcreatives.com to get free exclusive bonus material. And now, on with the show. Rob here, and welcome to another episode of Inspirational Creatives. I first heard of my guest today on a previous guest's podcast, Natalie Sisson's The Suitcase Entrepreneur. She's a mother of 5 children, an author, a speaker, and an entrepreneur, as well as a coach who is an expert on performance through mastery and mental focus. As these and topics on mindset often come up on Inspirational Creatives, I'm delighted to invite her onto the show today to learn more about her work and how she uses online journaling with her clients. So with no further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you today Kim Ades. Kim, welcome.
Happy to be here. Excited about this conversation. It's going to be fun.
I read somewhere you love to dance in the kitchen. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. My kids make a ton of fun of me, but yes.
Fabulous. So before we get stuck into it, let's learn a little bit more about yourself, Kim. You're based in Canada. Have you been there your whole life?
Yes, I grew up in Montreal. I was born there and slowly migrated to Ontario. And I've been living in Toronto for the past, 20 years.
Amazing. And I understand you speak fluent French too. Is that correct?
I do. It's a little choppy now, but I'm still pretty good.
Have you been to France or Paris?
Yes, I have. I was there twice, actually. Once when I was 16 and at a high school trip, and the next time when I was doing my master's degree in business, and I did part of my MBA in Europe. So that was part of the trip.
Perfect. That sounds exciting. So how did you get into coaching?
Wow, that's a big question. Okay, so, when somebody just has a natural predisposition for something, for me, it's coaching. So in a way, I've been coaching my whole life. But how did I get into it formally is that before I owned this business, I owned a software company. And we used to build simulation-based assessments. And the purpose of those assessments was to help companies make better hiring decisions and really kind of pluck from the crowd who would be the best performer in the group. And what we did was we ran them through a series of situations online, and we were testing for their personality, their skill sets, their IQ, all those kinds of things. And what we discovered was one common trait where it didn't matter what career they were going for, what position, what level, what industry, it didn't really matter. But there was one telling characteristic that would indicate to us that those people would be higher performers and more sustainable performers than any other person. And that was, if a person had a higher degree of emotional resilience, they were more likely to succeed in a big way in comparison to others. And so that was a part of my journey into coaching. And so I ran this company for 10 years. And then basically what happened was I ended up selling the company. I was partners with 2 other people. One of them was my ex-husband. And you can imagine how that worked out. But when your marriage comes to an end, it becomes very hard to stay in business with your ex-husband. And so I ended up selling my part in the company and venturing forward. And what happened right after that was I got hired by a coaching company to do some work in marketing and sales. And I started to look at how coaching is done out there in the world. And something about it just rubbed me the wrong way. And I felt like, you know what? I see what you're doing. And it was really an accountability-based coaching system where, the coach would hold the client accountable for doing a series of actions in order to reach their goals. And conceptually, it makes sense. But in my gut, I felt like something's wrong with this picture. And really the feeling I had was, this is really a lot of managing people's behaviors. It feels a little like babysitting to me. And the truth is, I think that people know what they're supposed to do, but they're just not doing it. And so why is that? And I started to connect the dots and realize that it really has to do with this element of emotional resilience. That if people had higher degrees of emotional resilience, they would be more likely to take the actions that they needed to take. And really, emotional resilience is all about how a person thinks and how a person responds to any adversity they experience. And those people with high emotional resilience really bounce back from their adversity with greater speed and agility. And I thought, what if we could teach people that instead of managing all their little actions in order to get to their goals? If we help them build their emotional resilience, now we're really setting them up to succeed. And that's when I started Frame of Mind coaching. So that's the short story.
That's amazing. Okay, let's go back to that time when you had the company with your ex-husband, because I'm intrigued as to how your own emotional resilience helped you through that time. Are you able to talk a little bit more about that?
Of course. So the honest truth was, it was one of the toughest periods in my life. It was really, really hard for a number of reasons. I found myself suddenly, a single mother of 2 kids. I had gotten married young, so I never really dated. So I'm out there kind of figuring out parenting on my own. We shared custody, but, when my kids were with me, I was the sole parent, and they were responding in a very, they had a hard time with the divorce. And so whenever they were at their dad's, they would call me crying and unhappy and miserable. And I was filled with guilt. And I just thought, oh my God, I don't know how to manage this. So my personal emotional resilience, you could say, wasn't at the highest place at that point. I was really, really struggling. And one of the things that I did was I started to journal. And I've always been a journaler, but I picked up my pace and I journaled like morning, noon, and night. And the journal was like a source of oxygen for me. And it helped me just unload and get rid of all the fear, the worry, the shame, the blame, the disappointment, all of those things. And it helped me just put it down in writing. But it also helped me do something else. It helped me to really, really determine what I wanted instead of what I had. And so the journal allowed me to always kind of right-size my brain many times a day and really turn myself around and continue to focus on what I wanted. The kind of parent I wanted, the kind of relationship I wanted, the kind of life I wanted, the kind of freedom I wanted, all of that. And the journal helped me point in the right direction. And so that piece was critical. And I started to read. I hired a coach. I did all kinds of things. And I just threw myself into the world of personal development. And slowly, my own emotional resilience got stronger and stronger and stronger. And I started to understand certain things. I remember this one time I spoke to the guy who was my boss at this coaching company that I worked for, and he saw how much I was struggling around just my kids and, feeling like, am I doing the right thing as a parent here by sharing custody? Maybe I should be stronger. Maybe I should demand full custody. All that stuff was kind of churning inside of me. And the advice I got was, focus on being the most amazing parent you can be. And I can't tell you how simple that was and how important that one sentence was to me, where I realized I can't control all the moving parts, but when they're with me, I can fill them up with everything that I can possibly give them.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a game changer, that right there.
So as a parent as well, I know it's easy to think, I want to be the best parent I can be, but what does that look like for you? And how do you achieve it without constantly feeling disappointed that you're not living up to your own expectations?
Well, so I do a lot of work with my clients on parenting, and I have a funny statement that I use at this point because I've done a ton of work and study, and this is my sweet spot. I have 5 kids, so I've got a lot of practice in, right? And really, what is parenting? We think that parenting is about disciplining, guiding. It's about really helping our kids do the right things by giving them parameters to work within. And I have to say that over the years, what I've learned is that parenting isn't actually about the child. If it were about the child, it would be called childing. It's not called childing. It's called parenting.
I like that.
And so what is that about? It's about self-management. It's about managing yourself while your kid is being your kid and trying to figure out the world from their own eyes. And sometimes we don't like what they're doing and we react and we respond and we use that as our reason to flip out and get angry and create rules and regulations and try to straitjacket them and all of that stuff. And really parenting is about the management of the self. And if we could start to get that in our minds, if we could start to learn that, then we're modeling the behavior of personal management, self-management, and we're starting to build relationships with our kids and allowing them to be who they are at the same time. And so let's look at the nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts of that theory, right? So what does that look like? I'll give you a perfect example. When my daughter was young, I was a single mother at the time of 2 children, and they would make their own lunches, or I would make the sandwich and they would make the snacks. And my daughter almost every day would say, "Mom, how many cookies do you think I should take?" And most parents think, well, we've got to manage, we've got to regulate, we've got to control how many cookies our children eat, because cookies aren't really good, they're not really healthy, they're filled with sugar, and we don't want to fill our children with cookies. And so any other parent would say, I think 2 is reasonable, take 2. That wasn't my response. My response was, how many cookies do you think you should take? Every day, same conversation. And why? Because what I really wanted to do is give her the reins of self-determination, self-management. And she would debate, well, I think I should take 4 because I want to share with whoever, her friends, and, and what if I need one for after school? And what if one breaks? And whatever, take however many you want. Doesn't matter to me. Yeah. And so slowly, even things like, the Halloween candy, some people say, well, we have to regulate sugar intake and all of that stuff. And I give her the candy bag, leave it in her room. And I have to tell you, 3 years later, that candy bag was still sitting there, practically full. And so when we hand over the reins of personal management to our children, we're letting them know we trust them. We're letting them know that we believe in their judgment. We're letting them know we're available on hand to help them when they're struggling, but we're not taking over. And I think by and large, parents feel like they need to control things. And even it's mealtime, we have to eat. And when our children don't eat, we have a really hard time with it. Well, how come we suddenly became the experts of somebody else's biology? How did that happen? Right? Can you imagine if someone told you, well, it's 3:00, you have to eat now. And you're like, well, I'm not even hungry. Like, why do I have to eat? As adults, we don't do that to one another, but we do that to our children, and we don't give them self-regulation.
Yeah, that's fascinating, actually. So in many respects, it's not just about relationships with them. It's very much about a relationship with ourselves. And it's also about a mindset in terms of being able to trust them.
So imagine you're the kid. Imagine you're, say 10 years old, and I tell you, I'm your parent, and I say to you, Rob, you know what? I trust you. I believe you can make the right decisions. How do you feel when you receive that message?
Oh, empowered.
You feel a sense of pride, right? And you live up to that. There's no way you're going to be disappointing, right? You're not going to do something to disappoint that parent who gives you total freedom and control. What you want to do is the right thing.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so definitely a few things to try there for me. You mentioned journaling earlier, and I know that one of the things that you do that I think you do differently to other coaches is that you work with online journaling with your clients. Could you tell me a little bit more about that and how that works?
Yeah. So what happens is we work with clients for, sometimes years, but sometimes 6 months. It really depends. But it's the first 10 weeks that are really important and foundational. And so what happens in these first 10 weeks? There's a call once a week. We record every single call, and we ask our clients to listen to the recording. The reason we do that is we want our clients to start to become masters and observers of their own thinking and start to understand how their thinking is affecting their results and their outcomes. And the premise here is that there is no bigger influence, no bigger component that affects your outcomes than your thinking. And so if you can start to become aware of your thinking and how it operates and the connection between your thinking and your outcomes, now you start to have power and control, right? Not control over others, but control over yourself. Again, self-management. Right? And so we ask them to listen to the recordings, to listen to their words, their tone, their stories, the repetitive patterns that come up. So that's part A of the coaching process. Part B is every single day for those 10 weeks, we ask our clients to journal in an online journal. So we built a software called Journal Engine, and we use that as our platform for journaling in a private space. And so what happens is Every week at the beginning of the week, the client receives a journaling question or a journaling prompt, and that starts the ball rolling. And every time they journal, the journal goes back to their coaches. I have a team of coaches. And so it goes back to their coach who reads and responds to the journal. And so they are in dialogue with their coach every single day. And what happens is they're going deep, they're fast, and they are starting to understand this connection between thought and outcome, thought and experience, thought and emotional state.
That's fascinating, because my, I suppose, instinct is that a lot of what we think about and what we do is perhaps subconscious in many respects. So are you suggesting there that this process actually kind of shines light on our thinking, in the sense that we can really look at what we're thinking and then begin to analyze it?
We can look at what we're thinking, and we can surface what is underneath the consciousness.
So in your experience with both written journaling and online journaling, are there any subtle differences in terms of the approach, or are there any different insights to be gained from the different types of process?
Well, typically when you write in a book, you're writing all by yourself and there's no one who's looking at it, right? And still, I mean, that could be the case in online journaling. You could, use some type of online journaling program and journal for yourself. And that's wonderful and great. And I strongly encourage anybody who's listening to do that, because journaling is much like meditation. It slows the brain down. Except, for me, when you were born, did you learn how to meditate?
No.
No, but as a child, you learn how to read and write. And so it's a bit of a more natural system for us to tap into, that allows us to just slow down the brain and turn it towards what we want. Okay, so I'm a big fan of journaling. And literally what happens is, in between every word you type or write, there's a space, because your mind is actually working a lot faster than your ability to type or write. And so it is, in a sense, a meditative process. So I encourage people to journal. It's really therapeutic. It's helpful. It calms the soul. It lowers blood pressure. It does all kinds of good things. However, when you're journaling with a coach, what you're doing is you're engaging in a dialogue that it's like a journey that you take together, that allows you to really look at what you're thinking and how your thinking is affecting you in ways that you have never seen before. So you suddenly become aware of your natural operating state. And you start to understand that some parts of your natural operating state are really, really helpful and have allowed you to achieve great goals so far and allow you to have relationships. And it's good, right? It's good for you, some of what you do naturally. But some of what you do is really getting in your way. So we want to take those things and kind of clean them up and allow you to not be so bogged down and not be the bottleneck in your own life. That's what we do.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about those bottlenecks. So what do you believe is like the biggest challenge for anyone wishing to improve their own performance? What have you seen with your clients? What tends to be the bigger challenges for them?
Well, what we see is a set of beliefs, right? So every person has a set of beliefs, and those beliefs are often beliefs designed to preserve the person, preserve the soul, the spirit, the body, the mind, the ego, whatever it is, right? They're preservation beliefs. But those beliefs are also beliefs that really play havoc with your ability to take the kind of action that will lead you to goal attainment. So I'll give you an example. Okay. A lot of my clients struggle with the need to be constantly in a state of productivity. Okay, they need to be productive. And if they're not productive, then they feel worthless, valueless. They have self-doubt, and all this stuff fills in. So if every minute of every day isn't productive, then they don't feel good. So their value is equated to all the things you do. And they've invented that paradigm. Another example is that a lot of clients feel like the only time when they feel valuable or good is when somebody else lets them know that they've done something valuable or good. So they're very, very dependent on other people's approval. And they're paralyzed by that when they don't get it. And if they don't get it, then there's a dialogue that goes on in their head. Oh man, I shouldn't have said that. That was stupid. Or I should just be quiet more, or I should speak up more, or, that was really dumb. How could I think of even saying that? Or what's going to happen now? Or, oh man, I don't deserve this role. I'm not up to the task, and on and on and on. And that dialogue starts to erode their confidence.
So in those instances then, is it external approval versus internal approval that you're dealing with, or is it approval or something else?
Well, that's exactly it. Internal approval versus external approval. And even I'll go so far to say, like, those people who seek external approval don't really understand that they are very much in the position to give approval rather than seek it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So tell me a little bit more about that. So how does the giving approval relate to receiving the approval in that sense?
Well, giving approval, when you start to understand that you're in a position to give approval, all of a sudden you're detached. You separate yourself from the need to receive approval, right? So the paradigm shifts, the positioning shifts, and there's a sudden understanding that we're all in the same kind of boat. We all kind of feel the same at different points in time. And if that's the case, then I could be a little bit more at ease in the world. I don't have to prove myself so much.
That's interesting, actually, because that kind of paints a picture for me that it's not necessarily that we're one thing or the other, but we're all on this spectrum at some different points or perhaps another. And it's a case of moving ourselves along that spectrum in that sense.
Well, and we're moving up and down the spectrum at all times, 10 times a day. That's the way it goes. But if we can become aware of when we're falling, when we're slipping, when we're spiraling down into this hole of self-doubt and self-loathing and just, beating ourselves up consciously or unconsciously, when we can catch that and say, okay, enough of that. That's not really helping me get to where I want to be. Now we have greater power.
That's really, really good. Yeah. I'd like to go back to this point you made a moment ago about, for some of your clients, it's about needing to be in a constant state of productivity. And I know for a fact that was something that I used to be challenged with myself. But tell me a little bit more about that and where that comes from in your experience, Kim.
Well, some people are wired with the need to be perfect. Some people have been told their whole lives that when they do something, when they take a positive action, they have received positive feedback. And so they understand that in order to fill their need for positive feedback, they have to keep doing what other people expect them to do. And so there's this, it's like a loop, right? It's a trap. Yeah. So in order for me to get the good feelings from others, I need to just keep doing these things. The question becomes, well, does that actually fill you up? And what we find is that it fills you up temporarily, but it's not a sustainable fill. Fills you up until the next time that you need another fix, right? And so what we do with these people is we just, first of all, help them see what they're doing. We help them see the trap they're in. And then we help them consider other options and say, what if your good feelings, actually we teach them this, that their good feelings come from their thinking and really is unrelated to the feedback that they're getting from others. Because it's about how you interpret the feedback anyways. So, for example, I may be in a meeting and I may throw something into the mix and somebody might say, wow, like you're so different. And then I might walk away going, man, I don't fit in. They think I'm different. Or I might walk away going, yeah, I'm different. I'm standing out. That was good feedback.
Yeah, I love that. There's a step in that whole sort of cycle there, which you've just highlighted to me, which is, it almost ties in with the point you were making previously about approval, which is there's this step in there, which is where we judge that at some level anyway and filter it to what it means to us. And I guess we can interject ourselves there. So it doesn't matter what we're doing, whether we're being productive or not. I guess it's in some respects having ownership over our feelings or our thinking in that sense.
That's exactly right. I mean, you said it perfectly. And this is how it works, is the way you think will profoundly affect the way you feel. So when you're feeling bad, mad, sad, any negative feeling, understand that it has absolutely nothing to do with the circumstances that are happening in front of you, but it has everything to do with the way you're processing the circumstances. And that is in your control. The circumstances aren't in your control, but the way you view them is completely in your control. And now we go back to the concept of emotional resilience. Those people with a high degree of emotional resilience process circumstances in a way that fuels them, serves them, in a way where those circumstances, even if they're negative, can be leveraged.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's all about interpretation in that sense.
All about interpretation. And so what we're doing is we're catching people's knee-jerk reaction and showing them how their interpretation of things is often set up in a way that erodes their ability to reach their goals.
Amazing. Yeah. So our friend, the listener here, might be thinking, right, I recognize myself in that. And I definitely recognize myself in the sense that I feel I have to be productive in order to feel perhaps that sense of self-worth that we're talking about here. What would you do if that was your client? What would be the first steps that you would suggest to them in terms of breaking that cycle, or at least getting a deeper insight into the fact that that is the cycle that that person is operating in?
So how would I actually, first of all, surface the cycle, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
they would tell me stories. They would say, oh, I went to a board meeting last week and here's what happened and I felt really bad and, I don't know if I contributed enough and et cetera. Then they would tell me another story the next day about how, they had a day off, but they didn't do anything productive with that day and how they feel lousy and, like what a waste of a day and on and on and on. And then they would tell me the next story. And this is how journaling works. The following day, they would tell me about how great they felt because they got X, Y, and Z done. So now I'm picking up a pattern, right? I'm seeing the pattern, and then I'm testing against that theory because right now I'm just suspecting that the pattern is their value is equated with their degree of productivity. And so now I would start to ask questions and say, hey, what happens when you're not productive? How do you feel? And I would literally ask the question. So are you saying that, when you're productive, you feel more valuable? And they might say yes. And then I would say, hey, what you're doing is you're hinging your feeling on what you do. But that's not really accurate. That's not how it works. How it works is that your thinking is what's creating your emotion, and your thinking about what you do is what's creating your emotion. And so here's the trap you're in. So I just show them the trap, and then they go, oh, so what are you saying? That I shouldn't be productive? And I say, no, not at all. Be productive. Have fun. But when you're not as productive, understand that it's not your lack of productivity that's causing the discomfort, the pain, the personal disappointment. It's the conversation you're having in your head about the lack of productivity that's causing the lack of satisfaction.
Right, got it. So the next step then would be to change that conversation, would it?
Exactly. And help them understand that it's my thinking that's causing me pleasure or pain. And if I have control over that and I'm catching myself feeling disappointed, let me use, let's call it the tools of thought mastery to help me move myself into a better place.
Okay, I'd love to learn a little bit more about thought mastery. So let's go there in a moment. I can imagine someone making that shift. This wouldn't necessarily be an easy transition, because to go from a very productive state to a less productive state, let's put it that way, can be quite a shift, I imagine. I'm almost speaking from my own experience here.
Hold on, I'm not telling you to go to a less productive state. What I'm suggesting to you is that when you beat yourself up over not being productive, your productivity actually decreases. Does that make sense?
It almost makes sense.
So when you're beating yourself up, when you're frustrated, when you're feeling like you don't have very much value or you're not contributing enough because you haven't done enough, let me ask you a question. What is your state? What is your emotional state?
Today, I'm a lot more relaxed with it, but I would say, and this is relatively recent, so it's easy to reflect and remember, but I would say I would feel agitated to some degree, like itching to get on with something.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to be doing something else. Right now, I feel like I've just got downtime, and like you said earlier, it's non-productive.
Right. Okay. So you would feel agitated. You might feel frustrated. You might feel a sense of, let's just say that you wouldn't feel on top of the world. You don't feel great about yourself.
True.
And people who don't feel great about themselves don't achieve amazing goals. So let's pretend we're in the Olympics and you're about to run a race and you're starting at the front of the race and you're like, man, I don't feel great about myself. Are you going to win the race?
I would have thought it's pretty unlikely.
Right. And so that thinking that's happening as a result of a lack of productivity actually debilitates you even further. So what ends up happening is you dig a deeper and deeper and deeper hole. And so in your head, you're like, okay, so let me just take more action, then I'll feel better. But what that does is just entrench that paradigm in your life. Do you see what we're talking about here?
I absolutely do, yeah. So it's almost like, well, you're still taking action, but the action you take is going to be different to the action that you'd have taken before.
And the action isn't going to be as productive because you're starting off from that negative point of view, that negative feeling.
Yeah, got it.
Right?
Yeah, so the action that you would have taken anyway carries less weight.
Carries less effectiveness. So here's what I want to teach people is thought precedes action, period. Right? We think and then we act. We think and then we speak. We think and then we walk. And even if that thought is something that happens in a microscopic portion of a minute or a second or whatever, it happens super fast, we're still thinking before action, right? That's the relationship. And very often when people are in a state of dis-ease, unhappiness, frustration, restlessness, whatever, they say, oh, I better go take action. And what I want to teach people to do is say, hold on a minute, before you take action, make sure you're taking action from a positive orientation. Because if I feel bad about myself and I take action, my action isn't going to cause me to win. So I have to change my orientation. I have to change my thinking for a minute first and then take action.
Okay, that's great. So it's almost interjecting another step there, which is an action in itself, which is to assess your thinking, to assess your state.
Assess your state and clean it up, lift it up.
And I imagine with practice, then that's going to get easier and easier, is it?
It becomes easier and easier. And the moments that you stay in that negative state become shorter and shorter. It's not that you never get to a negative state. We're human, right? But we don't fall into the hole as deeply and we don't stay there as long.
Got it.
Okay, so this concept of thought before action is really important. So I'm going to use an example. When we want a dog to wag his tail, we don't grab the tail and shake it, right? That's not what we do, right? But that's what we do in life, right? What do we do with the dog? We pat him on the head. We say, here, doggy. We address the emotions of the dog and wow, the dog wags his tail, right? The dog wagging his tail is a function of the feeling that they're experiencing.
Absolutely. And I could see almost, I mean, I'm not quite sure how this is or why this has popped into my head. I can see how this translates to almost everything that we do. So even when it comes to like sales and marketing, for example.
Not almost. It translates to everything we do.
Fascinating. So let's talk a little bit more about your own journey. So when it comes to your own performance, what do you feel has been the biggest or the most useful lesson or the biggest shift that you've felt knowing this that you've learned so far?
Well, for me, when I look at my performance as a coach, I've always kind of like leaned into myself. In other words, just trusted myself. Just trust what I hear, trust my reactions, and I literally use my mind, body, soul, spirit, everything, and just hand it over to the client. And so whatever I receive, I just kind of put it into the system called Kim and deliver that as a reaction. And so I've always done that. On another level, though, I do a lot of speaking, public speaking. And I'm a pretty good speaker. I get really great reviews and I do a good job, but my feeling about it hasn't been as confident. So I always walk away going, I feel exhausted. That wasn't inspiring. That didn't feel good. I could have done better. I rate myself a 6 out of 10 and on and on and on, right? Like I have this internal dialogue and over time that has shifted. And the way that that's shifted is I always felt like I'm on stage and I'm being evaluated for the way I dress, for the way I speak, for the way I interact, for the way I tell stories, etc. And I started to understand, like being on stage, I need to change the way I look at my role. And what I really need to do is understand that what these people need in the audience is a sense of a positive experience. So I need to deliver love. I need to be there and just love the audience. And if I could do that, then I'm hitting a home run every time. So that it's not about needing them to love me, but understanding that they need me to love them. That changed everything for me.
Wow, that's hugely insightful, actually. I've never thought of something like public speaking, for example, in that way. So this is about you offering them love and giving them love in that sense through your talk.
Exactly.
Yeah, rather than you being up there having to sort of receive that admiration for being an inspiring speaker.
Exactly. And honestly, like that just changed everything. Like I don't need positive reviews all the time. I get them, but I don't need them. What I need to do is make sure that as many people in that room are touched in a positive way and see themselves in a slightly bigger, better, broader light.
How has that changed for you? What have you noticed that's different since you've had that insight?
Well, I don't get stomach aches anymore before I speak.
Wow.
That's a good change, right? I come into it with greater ease. Like I do a lot of podcasts, and for me, it's just a good time. It's fun. I don't feel any discomfort or anxiety. There's no charge, and I love the no charge feeling because then I could just be totally passionate and focused and inspired. There's no distraction because all that other stuff is a huge distraction. It's like starting the race off feeling I don't feel good about myself. That's not a good way to win.
No. How do you deal with that? How do you remain focused and away from distraction?
I'm the type of person that when I'm in something, I really am just there. Like I'm in it, so I give myself over to it. Like you can hear right now, I'm totally engaged. I'm passionate. I'm speaking with my hands. I'm not looking at my computer. I'm just there, I'm just totally there. And so I have 5 children and I need to be there when I'm there too. So I try as hard as I can to just be where I am. I don't always succeed. Sometimes, my email clicks off and I'm talking to my husband and I just look down at my phone. But I try as hard as I can to be where I am.
That's amazing. As a father of 2, I'm in complete admiration of the fact that you have 5 children. How do you fit everything in with 5 children?
Well, there's a benefit of owning your own business. You can manage your schedule how you want. You don't have to answer to anyone. I love that part. I don't think I could ever work for anyone else. And I know that a lot of your listeners are entrepreneurs or people who want to be entrepreneurs, and you're definitely putting in the hours. But for me, I own my schedule. So if like this week, just a few days ago, one of my kids was graduating from high school and we took some time off and went to the grad, and there was a graduation breakfast. And so I fit everything in. I'm really good at milking the extra few minutes I have and really, really clear on my priorities too. And I think by and large, my life is filled with the stuff that's important to me.
What do your kids think you do?
They know I coach people.
Yeah.
They know how I coach people. They know my point of view. They know my orientation. They know my style. They know my approach because I do it with them, whether we like it or not. It's just part of who I am. So when I coach people, I'm not playing a role. I'm just being myself.
Yeah. As a coach myself, I recognize too that the more you learn about coaching, the more you practice it, the more it sort of infuses itself into your own character and personality. I can absolutely see how that translates through to being a parent too, which is absolutely fascinating. I'm really interested to know, as a business owner, Kim, can you remember that time when you made that early transition where you had to get extra help, where things were growing so fast and you had to start delegating and trusting other people with various different tasks that you may have originally owned? Did you ever have that experience, and how was it for you?
I've had it many, many, many times. But I'll tell you something. When I started my business, I knew something really important. And that was when I have someone who's working with me, for me, then I'm in business. And so from the get-go, I had someone working for me. And I'll tell you another story of this past business. So I used to own this software development company, but it wasn't always a software development company. When I first started, the company was called Upward Motion, and it morphed into becoming software. But initially, what I was doing is I was working with high school students and teaching them fundamental life skills that they could use in the workforce. And what I decided was I couldn't afford to hire anybody. I didn't have money. Right? I was living in a little 2-bedroom apartment and I wasn't really working. And at the time, my husband was doing his PhD, so we didn't really have any income. But what I did was I hired co-op students who don't cost anything. But the moment you have quote unquote employees is the moment you show up in your business very, very differently. So I'm a big fan of right from the get-go hiring or taking on help. You have to be serious. You have to show up. You have to have systems. You have to have something to transmit. You have to be there because someone else expects you to be there. So, I'm a big fan of accessing help. And for me personally, I'm really great at coaching, good at the marketing, sales, the representing the company side of things. I'm horrible at accounting, admin, software development. I'm not good at that stuff. So I don't do it. And I make sure that I have other people to do it. And my recommendation as an entrepreneur is do what you do well and get help for the other parts.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's great. So before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few closing questions, if I may. it's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful chatting with you today. I've just got so many insights, and I'm not kidding you, my journal right in front of me, which I usually scribble 1 or 2 notes in. I've got 3 pages full of thoughts and ideas as I'm going along here. There's so much we could have talked about. But what aspects of your work are you most passionate about today, Kim?
I love coaching the highly driven population. When I coach someone, first of all, it gives me the opportunity to always be in the modality of personal development. So I coach you, but I get to be personally developed as I'm coaching you. So that's super cool. The other thing is that, the concept of hanging around people who lift you up and inspire you, those are my clients. And so for me, coaching is an absolute honor and privilege. I learn from my clients. I'll give you an example. One of my clients has stage 4 cancer, and he's a young guy. He's in his early 30s, and he runs a business, and he lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and has to travel every 2 weeks to New York to get his treatments. And he lives with so much passion, so much engagement. He just finished a triathlon last week. And you look at all of these things, and these are the people I'm surrounded by, people who infuse their lives with life. And honestly, it doesn't really get any better than that.
Yeah, that's amazing. So if it's not related, what's inspired you most recently?
I started my own podcast, actually.
Fantastic.
And I'm still kind of figuring out what I should call it. And I'm playing around with a few names here. But what I'm doing is I'm interviewing past clients and entrepreneurs. They're all entrepreneurs. And I'm really asking them about what adversity they faced, what challenges they've been through. I just want one story, one big, huge challenge, and how they overcame it and how their thinking helped them overcome it. And maybe they're still in the middle of that adversity and how they have to wire their brain in order to deal with whatever they're dealing with right now. So I'm really looking at the thinking of individuals who have faced or are currently facing tremendous adversity. So that's the podcast, and I've done 3 interviews so far, and those stories are over the top, incredible.
That's amazing. Congratulations on starting a podcast. I'm a little bit biased, but I think that's a great thing. So what are you grateful for today, Kim?
Oh man, I wake up every morning and I do this. I just spend 5 or 10 minutes thinking about what I'm grateful for. And usually I'm grateful for just being able to wake up. Oh, I have another day. Way to go. I'm grateful for being able to climb stairs and the sunshine, my children, my husband. I'm just grateful for, the hot water in the shower. I just do the little things and it all accumulates.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. So where can folks find out more about you and your work, Kim?
So best place to find us is frameofmindcoaching.com. And one of the things I encourage everybody who's listening to do is right there on the website is an assessment. It's called Assess Your Frame of Mind. And what that assessment allows you to do is identify your orientation. So we talked about taking action from a negative place is always a bad thing, but we don't even know if we're in a negative place. We don't know where we are. We don't know which direction we're pointing in. And that assessment allows you to really take a snapshot and understand which direction are you pointing in. And I would recommend to anyone who's listening to start off by taking an assessment to really start to understand, how is their mind affecting them? How is their thinking impacting their results? And what happens after you take the assessment is you get an invitation to talk to one of our coaches to review the assessment and to give you a little bit of a taste of our kind of coaching. Strongly recommend that.
And once again, where can we find that?
frameofmindcoaching.com.
frameofmindcoaching.com. That's fabulous. Well, Kim, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening. Nothing beats the stories and advice of an expert to help you raise your creative game. I would love to know what you thought about today's episode, so don't forget to subscribe in iTunes, where you can rate and review the show. If you like this episode, I invite you to share it on Facebook or Twitter with the one person you know who will benefit from the wisdom shared here today. You can find the show notes on inspirationalcreatives.com/podcast. If you have a burning question or a great idea for a guest, head on over to inspirationalcreatives.com/contact, where you can connect with me there.